I was undecided about whether or not to record 2 videos at once, but I'll get to editing it anyway, and the kids are both back at school and I've got the days to myself again. And it's Friday today, which means if I don't do it today, then I need to wait till next week. Let's just do it today. Now, a while ago, I did a video. I ordered a whole bunch of parts for the Honda that I needed to repair, such as the foot bar that I bent when I crashed and the front brake lever. And although I didn't need them yet, I ordered what I thought was a complete set of OEM clutch pads. Unfortunately, instead of ordering... Oh, where the hell is my other clutch pad? Oh, it's here. Okay. When I burnt out the clutch on the Honda, I ordered a generic set of clutch pads, and I think it cost me about $35. When I ordered these parts from Honda, one of these clutch pads was $13 and the other one was $62. And I argued with the Honda dealer, like, why am I only getting one clutch pad for $62? And he says, well, that's the price of OEM, mate. And I'm like, I replaced it for 35 bucks when I burnt it out the first time. And I had a big rant about this in a video, which I'll link up here. All I want to do today is visually compare the $62, let me just confirm exactly which one it is because I've got the part numbers here. KREG01. Ironically, the one that comes in the shittier packaging is the more expensive one. So this is the outside clutch pads of the 4. So we have a $13 clutch pad, which is the inner 2 pads, a $62 clutch pad, which is the outer ones, and a generic clutch pad. Now I have this because the CB125F only requires 4 pads, and the $35 set that I bought came with 5. So obviously I have one left over. The thing is, this is a $62 pad. This is the generic pad. The generic pad actually has more friction plates on it. And the generic one is, I don't know, there's colors blue and red on the top, which across the entire generic set, there was no markings to suggest any particular difference. What I don't understand is that why they bother marking these in the first place, because all these, like the difference, if we hold these up side by side, there is visually no difference in the spacing or the gaps. I find it particularly ironic that the cheaper of the 2 OEM pads was packaged better than the expensive one. So I'm comparing now, this is the $62 pad and the $13 pad. What I'm seeing here is that on the outer pads, there appear to be fewer actual friction pads than on the internal one. And if we compare, this is the OEM part and the generic one. Again, the generic pad seems to have more actual friction pads on here. Basically, I've got my digital verniers here. The main thing I was interested about, this is going to completely ruin my video if my calipers are flat. What I wanted to do was measure if there was any difference in the width of the cheap generic pad versus the $62 OEM pad. Based on this one pad alone, I can just about get 2 generic sets for the price of one pad. That's 10 friction pads for the price of this one from OEM. I wore out the original clutch pads in the bike at just over 7,000 kilometers. And the generic pads have been in for at least another 6,000 kilometers and they haven't worn out yet. I have noticed that the clutch is getting a bit soft, so I know that they're wearing out, but the fact that my generic set of clutch pads has lasted almost as long as the OEM pads that came in from factory, and that this single clutch pad, that's $124 just for 2 pads for the inside and the outside. I don't understand why I should spend that when I could get 4 sets of generic pads and potentially burn through 4 sets of clutches for the price of 1. That's not counting the steels. I didn't order any steels that go in between the friction pads because, well, they're steel. They're not going to wear out. You shouldn't have to replace them every single time unless they're warped or scarred. And that's the other thing. The generic set for $35 came with friction pads and steels. It's making less and less sense. The reason this is such a big deal for me is that everything else from Honda has been a really, really, really good value purchase. It's been remarkably cheap to order OEM parts, but I just don't think that the clutch pads are going to be worth spending that much money on. Old battery. Now I have a spare battery in my kit here. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't put an old battery in my kit, but you never can tell with me. All right, so we have a working set of calipers again. Yay. This is the OEM outside plate, and this is the OEM inside plate. They're identifiable because of the marks on them. The OEM plate is 3mm, almost spot on. Take my word for it, please. The generic plate is the exact same thickness. And the OEM middle plate is the exact same thickness. There is no variation in the depths of these friction pads. Visually, the only thing I noticed was that the number of pads, there are more pads on the generic one, although the stock OEM pads appear to be a little bit wider. So if we just do this, zeroed, the pads on the external OEM pad is 4.5mm. On the generic pad, it is 0.3 of a mil smaller, which is not a massive difference by any stretch, but it just looks like they've stuck more on. On the internal OEM pad, they are smaller still. So the actual surface area on these OEM pads is actually less than the generic pads. There doesn't seem to be a lot of actual difference in the quality of the material on the pads. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to count how many actual pads are here. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so there are 40 individual pads on the OEM outside pad. I'm going to count 1. Okay, there's 40 pads on this one too. I don't understand the spacing. Maybe it's just because there's a slight discrepancy in the width of these. Again, I'm going to pick these up and hope that the GoPro can see. If we line these up like so, you can pretty well see that there's a difference. And of course, this is the generic pad. So 40 friction pads on the OEM. 1, 2, 3. All right, so I've just counted 48 friction pads on the generic. The biggest complaint I've had about using these generic clutch pads is that there seems to be an excess of fouling in the oil because, of course, it's a wet clutch. It uses the same oil to lubricate the cylinder and piston as it does to keep the wet clutch lubricated. And I wonder, there's a discoloration in the oil that happens almost instantly. And I just wonder if it's happening because there's more material being ground against each other. So as I say, I don't need to replace the friction pads in the Honda yet, but it is a job that I know is coming because I can feel the softness in the clutch lever, and I am that much more aware of it because, well, I've already burnt out the clutch once. I would rather replace them before I actually run into the same problem again. Instinct is screaming at me not to spend the money on the OEM pads. And I only need one more pad to replace the clutch when it goes. Because as I know, the OEM pads lasted 7,000 kilometers with my riding. The generic clutch pads have lasted almost as long. They're probably going to last another 1,000 kilometers, which ultimately, that's what I'm waiting on. I'm waiting on them lasting at least as long as the OEM clutch pads. So I can say, I told you so, Honda. Basically, what's going to happen next time that I change the clutch pads, that $62 clutch pad is going in the bike, but I'm not going to order another $62 clutch pad just to sit on the outside. So what's going to happen is it's going to go $62 clutch pad, generic clutch pad, and then to, what did I say, $12 or $13 clutch pads on the outside. I don't understand what makes this $62. There is no difference in width at all between the OEM parts and the generic parts. So it's not a matter of clutch clearance. I'm hoping that the internet does what the internet does best. Somebody who knows better than me, please tell me why a particular clutch pad needs to be on the outside and why is it 4 times the price. I simply don't understand. Apart from mild differences in the appearance of the pads between the generic and the OEM ones, you can't look at the pads like that and tell me that's OEM or that's generic. Okay, we can tell because this is a little bit oxidated. It's been sitting out of the bike for over a year, I think. Let's have a glimpse behind the curtain. Clutch. It's been a year since I replaced the clutch pads for $35. Obviously, that's not counting the cost of oil, but I already have oil. The right-hand case gasket from Honda cost $4, which is why I say I repaired it. I still haven't used that gasket because when I did it a year ago, the gasket was intact and it hasn't leaked in a year. But I suspect when I change these clutches again, I'm going to have to replace that gasket. $4, who cares? That's why that $62 friction clutch doesn't make sense to me. You can't tell me that I'm going to damage anything because I've been riding this bike for a year with these generic clutch pads. And if you watch any of my videos, any of my riding videos, you know that I abuse the absolute hell out of this bike. If I was going to have a clutch failure just because my pads are cheap, it would have happened. I bought this bike almost 2 years ago now exactly. You can't tell me I'm wrong for using cheap clutch pads because they've lasted as long as the OEM parts did that came from factory. Make it make sense. I have 3 clutch pads sitting in stock and I need a 4th. WarrigalPowersports.com. This is my nearest Honda dealer. Despite me going in there and arguing with them about the price of this clutch plate, they've been really good to deal with. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you how. Now, my bike is technically a 2022, but it is plated as a 2023 because that's when I bought it. And the Australian model designation is, of course, CBF125MN. It's the MN that is important here, not the placement of the F. Frustratingly enough, the 3 parts that I need are on 3 different assembly lists. All right, this is the clutch assembly. These parts that are listed as number 5, I'll show you again down here. $64, I was saying $62, but $64.80 for those clutch pads. Whereas the ones labeled 4 internally, okay, they might have gone up with the year, but $13.57. That is still effectively a quarter of the price. Even if you insist on buying OEM, explain to me why you can't just buy 4 of these. And the steels, of course, they're $11 each and you need 3 of those. All right, let's work out what the total price is for an OEM clutch kit. For the 2 internal clutch pads is $27.14. For the 2 external clutch pads, it's $129.60. And then for the 3 steels, it's $33.69. Which means the total price for buying an OEM clutch kit, this is the magic number. Why am I going to spend $190.43 on clutch pads when I can get that entire kit for $35? Wemoto, actually, I've ordered from them before. They do seem to be pretty good. They've got the entire assembly there for $173, which again, that's cheaper than just the pads and the steels. This is precisely my point. For $31.59. Why am I going to spend $190 on one set of OEM parts when I can get divided by 31.59? I can get 6 of these generic sets for the same price as one. And let's assume that every clutch kit needs to be replaced at 7,000 kilometers exactly. 7,000 kilometers times 6. You can potentially do 42,000 kilometers on your 6 clutch kits for the price of one 7,000 kilometer OEM kit, because that's the average kilometers I'm getting with my riding on my bike. I've already proven that these cheap generic kits last as long as the OEM clutch pads. That's done. I've already proven it. So why am I spending $190 for OEM parts when I can do it for less than $32? Make it make sense. Okay, here's the thing. These generic clutch kits come with 5 pads. The Honda only takes 4. So what are we getting? 6. We're basically effectively getting a 7th kit. So I can get 7 times 7,000. 49,000 kilometers potentially if each of these kits are getting replaced at 7,000 kilometers exactly, which I've already proven is how long the clutch lasts with my riding. The bike has done around 13,500 kilometers already. I don't understand why anyone would spend $190 when you can spend $32. I just potentially ordered 6 of these kits for $189.54. 6 clutch kits for the price of one OEM clutch kit. Make it make sense. Obviously, I'm not clicking buy now on 6 kits. That's insane. I have always believed in show, don't tell. I always say don't do what Nick does, but in this case, don't spend $190 on one kit. Just don't. I've just ordered a generic clutch kit for $31.59. I only need one pad out of that kit because I've already got 3 pads here. I have enough clutches to last another 14,000 kilometres. That's twice the distance I've already done on my bike. I taught myself how to change the clutch on this bike. It's not difficult, and I'll do a video on it again. I don't understand why you would give Honda $190. I've already proven that you can run the cheap pads for as long as the OEM pads. My bike is still running. Why? Why would you do that? You're not getting an order from me for a clutch, Honda. I came here for sprockets and chain. And this is the other side of the same coin. This is where that clutch is the only thing I've seen from Honda that has been ridiculously, stupidly expensive for no reason. What we need is one front sprocket, so 16. The front sprocket is $7.04. Add to cart. I need, oh, interestingly, how much is the cush drive? Oh my God. The cush drive is only $3.68. That's impressive. Okay, I need a rear sprocket, number 3, $16.43. The only thing I need now is a new chain. I think it might actually be listed on the swing arm. Here it is, I was right. For some reason, the chain is listed on the swing arm assembly. Kind of makes sense, I guess. New chain, item number 3. $27.91 for a new chain. The total price for new sprockets and a new chain from Honda, OEM, $49.42. Now, unfortunately, I can't pay for that this week. But next week when I get on there, $49.42, and I can replace my sprockets and chain before they actually break and cause a problem. Preventative maintenance. I've already noticed that I'm running out of adjustment on the chain tensioner. So for less than $50, I can get brand new parts and I don't have to think about it again for another 14 or 15,000 kilometers. So that is coming up. Yeah. In summary, chip tuning box for the Honda CB125F. Replacing the clutch pads again for the CB125F. Replacing the chain and sprockets for the CB125F. And then on the Duke, what do I need to do? Replace the fork seals. That's a job I've never done myself, but I said that about the clutch and figured it out. I'll be able to figure it out for the Duke too. 2 years since I took delivery of the Honda, I need to bleed the brakes and replace the brake fluid. 2-year service. So what's that? 4 videos coming up for the Honda, at least 1 for the KTM. I want to re-vinyl the seat cover on the Duke as well. So that's another thing I get to figure out. This is the only one that I've seen that's actually got the seals for the pair. $80. So I'm looking at $80 to $150 depending on what I decide I'm going to buy. There we go, a quality pair of fork seals. I'm probably going to go with this one here. Dyno tested to last 3 to 4 times longer than OEM seals. How do you dyno test a fork seal? Where's message seller? Hi. Just wondering how you managed to test these. Look, this is not the first time I've called out an eBay seller. I found a seller trying to sell an ECU for the CB125F for around $200. I sent them a screenshot of this. They were selling the engine control unit for almost $200. And I said, what makes your ECU so special that it's that price when it's $32 from Honda? And they messaged me back saying that item's now in the bin. Like, they got called out and they were like, well, obviously we're never going to sell it. Not even worth it as a paperweight. It's now in the bin. Hi, the ECU straight from Honda is $36. Well, I even upped the price, $32 as I just showed you. It's not worth $200 apparently when we dismantled this bike. It was brand new and there was no price listing from Honda at the time. Thanks for pointing it out. It just went in the bin. Don't assume that just because you're buying something secondhand that you're getting it cheaper than buying it new. This is one of my favorite interactions I have ever had with a seller on eBay. What can I tell you? Oh, shit. If you see someone who's blatantly ripping you off, call it out. Just do it. Thanks for joining me on this glimpse behind the curtain. Future Nick, I'm sorry for how much editing this is going to take because I wasn't intending to sit here chatting to you for 2.5 hours. That's it. Let's end the stream here.